Hello there, and welcome to this video on rearranging equations and problem solving. So in our last video, what we looked at was our slope-intercept form, so y equals mx plus b, and sometimes you're not always given it looking like this. So what we have to do is we need to rearrange it. So rearranging equations, we just got written here, often we need to rearrange the equation to get that slope-intercept form. And from our last video, we looked at the m and the b. The m represented the slope, and slope, again, was just rise over our run. And then the b, that was our y-intercept, or wherever it crossed on the y-axis. So we're going to do a couple examples here first where we're going to rearrange. So it says, express each equation in slope-intercept form and indicate the slope and y-intercept. So really what I gotta try to do is I gotta try to get it to be y equals and then everything else over on the other side. So in order to get this by itself, that y by itself, I'm gonna have to minus a 4x from both sides, minus a 4x. And I'm also gonna have to get rid of this minus 15. So to get rid of that, I'm gonna have to add 15. And I gotta do that on the other side here too. So these will cancel and these will cancel. And I'll just have 5y equals negative 4x plus 15. Now this y here, it isn't quite by itself, so we gotta get rid of that 5 in front, and it's being multiplied by 5. So in order to do the opposite, we have to divide by 5. And then we gotta divide our other terms on the other side as well by 5. So these will cancel, and also on the other side, 15 divided by 5, that's just gonna equal 3. So what we end up getting, the y is going to come down. So we got y equals, this fraction I can't simplify. So this negative 4 over 5 can't simplify that fraction. So we got negative 4 over 5. And then you can put the x second. And then plus, and we just had a 3. So that is our slope-intercept form. And highlighting the m and the b, you can see that the m, which is our slope, is the negative 4 over 5, and then our b, which was our y-intercept, that is that 3 there. So number 1 is now all finished. You can move on to number 2. Here we got 3x equals 4y plus 12. Now again, we just want to get this y by itself on one side. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to totally flip it so that whatever's on the left is now going to be on the right, and whatever's on the right is going to be on the left. So I'm going to have 4y plus 12, that's now on the left, and 3x is now on the right. So I want to get this y isolated. So I'm going to have to subtract 12 first. We got to do that on both sides. It'll cancel on this side. And then I just have the 4y over here and 3x minus 12 on the right. And then to get rid of this 4, we're going to have to divide by 4. So divide by 4, and then again, every other term also has to be divided by 4. So these 4's will cancel, and this one here, 12 divided by 4, that's just going to give us a 3. So what we get out, there's only this y, so just the y will come down. And then we got 3 over 4x. That 3 over 4, you can't simplify that, so just keep it as it is. And then we had minus and 3. So there's our slope-intercept form. And highlighting the slope and the y-intercept, I can see that my slope, that is the 3 over 4. And then the y-intercept, that was b, that is just that last number, which was a minus 3. So those are done. Now we can go on to our next question, and this is going to be a problem-solving type question. So it says a group is selling tickets to raise funds for a trip. The relationship between the number of tickets sold, which is going to be represented as x, and the profit, which is represented as y, and it's measured in dollars, is represented by the equation 12x minus y minus 840 equals 0. So this equation gives us the relationship between the number of tickets sold and the profit. If you sell more tickets, you're going to get more profit, you're going to make more money. So part A, it says what is the slope and what does it represent? So to get the slope, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to convert it into slope-intercept form. And that's actually what we did on the first page. So I'm going to start with this, and I am going to get it into the y equals mx plus b. So let's write that out. 12x minus y minus 840 equals 0. And then we're going to minus 12x and add 840 to get rid of those. Do that on the other side as well. So minus 12x and plus 840. So these will cancel and these will cancel. So I got negative y equals negative 12x plus 840. And then I still need to get rid of this negative in front here. So I'm going to have to divide by a negative 1. And I got to do that with all of the other terms. So they all get divided by negative 1. So those will cancel. These ones will cancel. And with these two, positive and a negative, well, that's going to give me a negative. So what we get out from this, I got y equals, it's just 12x. And then it was going to be minus 840. So to answer the question, what is the slope? That number right there in front of the x, that is the slope. And it also asked, what does the slope represent? So if x is the number of tickets sold, and you were going to multiply that by 12, let's say you sold 2 tickets and you multiplied that by 12, well, that would give you how much money you made. So this right here, 12, that must be how much each ticket costs. So the slope, which is 12, is the cost per ticket. So I'm just going to highlight that in a different color just so we can see the cost per ticket is 12, so $12, and that's also our slope. So part B, it says what is the y-intercept and what does it represent? So we already changed our equation into slope-intercept form. So this value right here, negative 840, that is our y-intercept. So there was no need to rearrange, we already got it. So it is at negative 840. So we got what our y-intercept is. To answer what it represents, remember y it said was dollars. So y is going to be the amount of money. So in this case, y is your profit. So if you had the y-intercept being negative 840, remember the y-intercept occurs when x is 0. So basically you have this point. So 0 and negative 840, where that is x and this is y. So x, remember, was the number of tickets sold. So if the number of tickets sold was 0, you didn't sell any tickets, and your profit was negative 840, that means you are in the hole $840. You've lost $840. So that must mean that this amount is like your starting or your initial costs. So your y-intercept is your initial costs. And then again, I'm just highlighting those. Our y-intercept, we got negative 840, and that represented your initial costs. So last thing here now, part C, it says how many tickets must be sold to break even. So the words break even, when you break even, that means your profit is going to equal 0. So your profit, which we said was y, is going to equal 0. So in our equation, the y is going to equal 0. So we had y equals 12x minus 840, and now the y is going to change to a 0. So I have this. So this is just an equation, and I can solve that equation. So I want to isolate this x. So I will add 840 onto both sides. The 840 will cancel on the right. So I only have 12x on the right there, and on the left I have 840. Then to get rid of this 12 in front of the x, we have to divide by 12. Got to make sure to do that on the other side. 12s will cancel. And so we get from this just an x on this side, and on the other side, 840 divided by 12, that equals 70. So what this means, if x equals 70, remember x was the number of tickets, we were going to have to sell 70 tickets to break even. So there is our answer for that one. Moving to our next word problem here. It says the cost of a wedding reception involves a fee of a ballroom and a buffet charge depending on the number of guests, right? More people you invite, the more it's going to cost. So at the beginning, if you have 0 guests, it's still going to cost you $425 to rent out the ballroom. And then as you get more guests, it's going to cost you more money. So part A, it says sketch a graph using the data. So what I did is I made a graph. We put our number of guests on the horizontal axis and our cost is on the vertical axis. I went up by 25s on here because it went up by 25 in our number of guests, and our cost was going up quite largely, so I went up by 1,000 each time on my cost. So what I'm going to do here first is I'm just going to add a little grid kind of on top of our graph to make it easier to plot our points. So I've gotten my grid on there, and again, I just did that just to make it easier to plot my points. You could do the same kind of thing just using your ruler, so it made it easier to put your points on. So the first one at 0, we had $425. So at 0 guests, that's right there, we're going to be at 425. Now this right here is 1,000, so half of that is 500, and we're at 425. So we're going to be just a bit below that, so about right there. The next point, we're at 25 and 1,800. So moving over to 25, we're going to go up. That's 2,000. So that's why I drew that line. We're going to be just below that because we're at 1,800. So we can put a point about right there. Then our next one we had for 50, we're at 3,175. So 50, I'm going to go up. This is 3,000. So we're going to be just a little bit more than that. So we can plot our point right there. And then the last one, at 100 guests, we're almost at $6,000. So we're just less than 6,000. So 100 guests, we're going to be just below 6,000. So we can plot our last point right there. And then after, if you wanted to make this look a little nicer, you could go ahead and erase all of your lines that you put on to make it easier, or you could just keep them there, just make sure they're drawn lightly. So part A is done. Looking at part B, it says calculate the slope and the y-intercept. And then it also asks, what do they represent? So what we could do is we could use these points. We've done this before. Use those points to find our slope, and then do the y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. But I can show you another way here. What we're going to do is we're going to take these different changing values and these different changing values. So each time on this side, you can see it goes up by 25, and on the right hand side, to get from 425 to 1,800, it added on $1,375. Okay, and then it continued with that. So the cost here is like our y, and then the number of guests here is our x, because that's where we put it on our graph. Cost is on the y-axis, guess is on the x-axis. So remember our slope, I'm just going to write down here. Slope is the change in the y divided by the change in the x. So the change in the y was 1,375. So I'm going to put that 1,375, and that's dollars, divided by the change in the x. That was 25 guests. So I'm going to put that here, 25 guests. And if you simplify this fraction, go 1,375 divide by 25, what you're going to get is 55. So that is $55 per guest. I'm just using the same units as what I had here. Dollars per guest. So what does that represent? If you had $55 per guest, that's the cost for each guest. So we've gotten the slope and what it represents. We also needed to find the y-intercept. And the y-intercept was just where it crossed on the y-axis. And that is right here, and that was at 425. So it's when x equals 0, whatever you get for the y, that is your y-intercept. So our y-intercept is 425. And what that 425 represents is your initial costs. That's how much the banquet is going to cost with 0 people. And then as you add more people, it's going to cost more money. Okay, so this is your initial costs without any people. Moving to part C, it says write an equation in slope-intercept form. So remember that's y equals mx plus b. And I already know what the slope and what the y-intercept is. So this is y equals m is 55, that's our slope, and then we have the x, don't forget to put the x, plus b, which that's our y-intercept, which is 425. Now part D, it says what is the cost for 140 guests? So 140 guests, that is going to be our x value Remember up top, we had those guests listed as x. So I'm going to put 140 into my equation here. So it's going to be y equals 55 times x, and x is now 140 plus 425. So it's going to be $55 for all the 140 people plus $425 that we needed to rent the hall. So when I throw that in my calculator, I'm going to get $8,125. And lastly, part C. It says if the budget is $15,000, how many possible guests could attend? So if we have a budget of $15,000, remember the y was dealing with the money. So in our equation here, the y is going to change to 15,000. So we're going to write out the equation. Y equals 55x plus 425. Then we're going to change the y into 15,000. So this is 15,000. And then the only thing that we have here to solve for is an x. So we are going to get that x by itself. So first I'm going to subtract 425 from both sides. That will cancel over here. So I just have 55x. On the left, 15,000, subtract 425. That's going to give me 14,575. And then lastly, divide by 55 on both sides to get rid of that 55. So those cancel, and we end up getting out of this, x is equal to, taking 14,575 and dividing by 55, you'll get 265. So that's 265 guests that could attend. That's the max amount of people for your budget of 15,000. So that was our last word problem. We just got one more type of question here we're going to look at. And this is where they give you some information for the equation, and they give you a point, and then they ask you to find, say, a missing value. So in this one, it says, given this line y equals 2x plus b, and the point -1 and 5 is on this line, find the missing value b. So what you're going to do is we're going to put this point into this line because it's on the line. So this is x, and this is y. So those are going to change in here where I have my x and my y. So y is going to change to a 5. Then I got 2 times x is a -1 plus b. So I can solve for b. So I got 5 equals 2 times -1 is -2 plus b. To get rid of that -2, we are going to add 2, and then add 2 on the other side. These ones will cancel, and so I just have a b on this side, and on the other side, 5 plus 2, I get 7. So just changing the order of that, b is equal to 7. So we got another one of this type here now. If you want to pause the video and try to do this one, it's just in this one you are finding m now. So again, they give you a point. Take your point and plug it in where x and y are, and then solve for m. So hopefully you tried that one. You could have used the steps that you kind of did up here. So first thing, you're going to label your point, x and y, and then plug those in. So y is -1, then we had m times x, and x is a 6, then -5. So we got to get this m by itself. So I am going to just first go 6 times m, that's multiply, that gives me 6m. And now I got to try to get that m by itself. So I'm going to get rid of this -5 here first. So I'm going to add 5, then add 5. These ones will cancel. So on the right, I only have 6m. On the left, I got 5 minus 1. That's just 4. And now to get this m by itself, just divide by 6 to get rid of the 6. Do that on both sides. These ones will cancel. I can simplify on the other side. I can divide both of these by a 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. So on the right, the only thing that's there is an m, and on the left we have 2 over 3. And then again, I'm just going to change the order of this. M is equal to 2 over 3. And again, m just represents our slope. So the rise is 2, and then the run is 3. So that was our final example. Last thing I'm going to do here is just write up our homework questions. So just to note, number 9 and 10, you're just doing A and D. and 19 is as a challenge. So if you want to challenge yourself, try that number 19.